I do it.
Okay.
Okay, so I record it.
Okay, thanks. Just wait a couple seconds. Second. Can you guys still hear me?
Yeah, perfectly.
Okay, good. Okay, perfect. Okay. So I wanted to start with a sort of when we talked on the Discord server about maybe possibly opening up this sort of an incubation, creative incubation or idea incubation space. We were talking, as I said before, we were there were people that were interested in opening up a space for new proposals where you sort of, because a lot of people come into Cardano or into the swarm with ideas for their proposal, and they have to figure out a way to create those proposals. But there, as we go on and as we've sort of been talking, and I've been part of playground discussions and different discussions within the Cardano spaces, the different spaces like of Catalyst. There is also it seems as though there's a need for us to find ways to join together on sort of a higher level discussion where we have where we can sort of build ideas or find ways to generate ideas that neither of us had thought about. So we have the developers or the people with the ideas. How do we join those two interests together to be able to come up with something? And so when I'm talking, so I talk about artists contributing, and a lot of people think, when they think of that, they think of NFTs or image making. And I come from a background in academia where we we had seminars where we would get together scientists and artists and people from the humanities, robotics engineers or computer scientists, and we would get together and we would try to build something. So we might try to build a new way of creating a video game or a computer game or an MMOG. We might, how can we do that? How can we connect a build like that with, say, a science lab and where with biologists? What can we learn from each other, and how can we share information so that we can create something new? And I wanted to, so I'm going to show a brief video of an artist named Edward Riordan. And he is, I'm not going to show very much of it, just a little bit of it. And what he does is he creates, he is actually hired by the military and various and other groups and corporations to use his intuition to be able to come to perceive and to understand information. And so I just wanted to I wanted to share that, and I'm going to do it by copying the link and sharing it on my screen as a URL. You have to forgive me, I'm a little bit jittery from that earlier experience. I'm working on it.
Fine. It's all fine.
Okay, thanks. So hang on a second.
We appreciate your initiative.
Thank you. Okay, so this is the video, and if I can, my browser will not let me do full screen from this perspective. So let's see if we can. We might have, and I want to get it past that point. Are you getting sound? Or
Not
just
yet.
Really quiet?
Not yet.
No sound yet?
It's still loading.
Okay. It's interesting. So it must load slower when there's more people watching it. Because we did this earlier. Okay, hang on. So he's still not, is the sound still not there?
No.
Okay,
If we can also, you can post a link in the chat, and I can do it from my screen.
okay, good. Okay, okay, thank you. Okay. You have to scroll a little bit past his introduction.
Yeah.
Also, just okay, thank you.
So you should see my screen now.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like I have a very slow internet right now. So where should I start? It's 2 minutes?
Yeah, that's good. Just past the introduction. So can you hear me, my voiceover while we're doing this, so I can talk while it's loading in, maybe?
I can hear you
Yes.
perfectly.
Okay, thank you.
So I
So
think,
go ahead.
yeah, okay. When you want me to stop, just say it.
Okay. Okay, so just pause it for now and then we'll start again. Maybe hopefully it'll load. So what he's doing is in front of the whiteboard, he is given a number. It's just a random number. And he is and the image on the right, that is in a sealed envelope. He does not know what that is yet. And then in the picture of him down in the lower right, that is him describing, he will be describing what he's doing. But what he does is he uses his fingers and his pen, and he just taps on the board, on the number. And as he does that, he starts to open up his perception, his awareness. It's his awareness from different parts of his brain that allows him to perceive the information, to perceive what is provided to him, that image that's provided to him. So this is like really common. This is a really common process of using your intuition to be able to become aware of information that's outside of your awareness, your initial awareness. And this is a process that's very common in artistic processes, but also in all disciplines where we're creating ideas or information, where we're thinking of new things. So we'll just watch a couple seconds, just like 10 seconds of it or something like that.
Okay.
Go ahead. Thanks.
Formation mechanism. Stimulus, formulation mechanism, dimensional sensation. The formulation of a dimensional sensation.
So he's thinking out loud. He's thinking to himself. He's trying to organize. He's trying to get his mind to come back to a focus.
Should I go on?
Is this? Yeah, I did it. Yeah, go ahead. Just a little bit more actually. Just gonna play or not? Do you think?
Sorry, I didn't get your voice, Mata.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead for a little bit more, please.
Yeah.
Have to experience the dimensional first. So obtain the dimensional stimulus. 8742. That's a nice loop. There's a nice loop.
Okay, we can stop it. I think it's sort of imperceptible for the most part, so that's okay. Thank you, though, very much. Appreciate that. Sharing your screen.
Okay.
So let's see. Okay. We're back to there we are. Just wanted to share that to say that, and it would have been nice if we could have actually see him actually do the process. But anyway, that's just a way of opening up, one way of opening up the ability to access your thinking mechanisms so you can get new ideas. And I wanted to bring in then the idea of, say, with an iPad, and when Steve Jobs created the iPad, that it was in a sense like a viewing window. And Steve Jobs came from a background of where he did not go to college. He did not, because he did not want his parents to pay for his college because they did not have the money. And so he created a viewing. So he did the audit classes at a university. And one of the things that was really important to him was calligraphy and letter form, and the movement of your hand when across a field or across a plane, to be able to draw, to move, and how that affected the way you think about things. And so there was so he understood this
Martha, sorry,
of gesture.
Sorry to interrupt you.
And he understood that his body was a primary object, and that there was also a desire.
You are very delayed, and your voice is kind of
Object, something that you would desire
yeah.
when expression, and so a process, which is sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah, you're very delayed. I don't know if you have to change something.
I don't know why that's happening.
No, it's
hang on
better.
a second. Is it better now? Better now?
Right now, yes. Let's just try it. Did you change something? I
changed my location.
Okay, maybe that's.
But I can switch. I'm on. Yeah, let me switch to my wireless connection. Yeah. Let's see if
might be better.
If you could be close, your voice is going away, and you're talking about very interesting stuff.
Okay. Okay.
It sounds like a bandwidth issue.
Yeah. So it would be a shame if you don't hear your things. Because in the beginning it was all fine.
Yeah, this tends to happen a lot. So is it better now?
Perfect.
Yeah,
okay, I'm on
very
wireless
clear
now. Thank you. So did you get any of the part about Steve Jobs, or was that all distorted?
Maybe you can do it again.
I stop in his perception of the body.
Okay. All right. Right. So, and did you get the part about that he learned calligraphy, that was a focus of him through auditing university courses?
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay. So anyway, okay, sorry. There's so many distractions. It's like, okay. So anyway, so he understood this sort of like relationship of the body with the interface, and just to go back to regarding a space, an incubator space. So as I said, there is a history of these kinds of spaces, and we have them like at MIT. We have the Media Lab where they have these kinds of interactions. We have Xerox PARC, PARC, which has been established in 1963 and is still ongoing, where advanced scientists and creative people from all fields have sessions and residencies and work together. There's a place called Symbiotica, which is in Australia at the University of Western Australia, and that where they focus, artists and scientists focus more on biology, which we also did at Carnegie Mellon. And then there's and well, I'll just leave it at that. So I thought as maybe a possibility, I would just sort of introduce a concept about interface, and maybe we could discuss how you think about interface, and we could sort of do sort of an experimental collaboration here in this session, just to see how that worked. If is anybody willing to try that?
Sure, sounds good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So, so I'm just going to start with I'm going to start with a few ideas, and then we can start with. So there's a simplicity of interface, so that you can have like the least number of mediators, or the least number of transactions or mediations in an interface. So between you and your device, whatever that device is, your computing device or your access point to the computer. And so the primary container is you. The machine is other. It's not you. And you can create the most, so how can you create the most primal relationship between you and the machine without losing yourself, without losing who you are without the machine? So you can still access your perceptual apparatus, your senses, and your intuition. So your sense of touch is one of the most important senses, because it creates a link between your body, your primal container, your nervous system, because if you touch something, your nervous system is triggered, and your brain, and it generates a series of signals, and it brings you into contact with information which lies just outside your perception. So it generates new ideas. Just the sense of touch can generate new ideas. And if we do not bring new information into our awareness, we are constantly repeating the same actions over and over again. We just change them slightly, but we create stagnation for ourselves and for our users. So if we're going to build a new economy, then we can also build new paths on which people can arrive to engage with that economy. And we do that through interface, through developing perhaps new forms of interface. So we have screen-based interfaces, which are part of our legacy systems, and they force users to adopt and learn their language. So people have to learn them, and it's a specific language. So they are not decentralized. A tactile interface, so something that involves touch, and it can come in many forms, comes in an endless number of forms, but we have to invent it to fit our own experience of culture. So every culture would have to, in order to really completely utilize who they are, would have to invent their own form of interface, because from that interaction will come insights. And you want, tapping, touching, gesture, sensing, in order to perceive that which is just outside of our awareness. And we work together on solutions to problems, and each person has a unique perceptual filter, and no two are alike. So we do not exclude or expect others to have the same insights. To have the same insights in lockstep brings no new inventions. And we end up only building stuff that is layer on layer, like a black box containing a black box, until all computing systems are so heavily laden with upgrades, they no longer function, or they function in a very inefficient manner. So the structures we create to generate ideas, generate our environment, and some tools need to be free of their own language. We need not to be dependent on the language of a machine's interface to think. We can think autonomously. So that's how I am thinking about it. Just to let you know, that's how sort of the idea. Does anybody have any responses just to that, to any of those ideas, or is that confusing? Does that not make sense?
I just gonna make one comment, please. I love the idea of the remote viewing, the government of the United States use remote viewing for many, many other things. And I'm so happy that you brought it to the process of thinking.
Yeah, it's been for a long time, but now like with Edward Riordan and some of the younger people, they are having all new approaches to be able to utilize that, and they observe themselves, which is a really also an important piece of it, I think, too. But you're right, Maria, it has been a part of our being able to understand things that we may not be aware of. But it's really also useful in just in a one-on-one or with other creative people when working on innovation. It's really helpful with innovation as well, because it's really just an awareness tool. And Ingo Swann, who is an artist who invented the protocol for remote viewing, he also said that an example of it would be like of how natural it is to human beings is like if you're walking on a path in a mountain, and you come to a place where you come to a point in your walk, and all of a sudden you stop and you take 2 steps back, and you don't know why, but then all of a sudden right in front of you the path drops off because there was an avalanche or something happened and the path drops off. And we all have those kinds of experiences in terms of our awareness, and it's kind of like tweaking that part of your brain to be able to figure out how to be able to use it with more facility, so it's more so that you can really engage. And everybody does that kind of process. And I'm not advocating for remote viewing. I'm just saying I'm saying that process is sort of the process of artistic engagement. So.
A lot of that resonates with some stuff that I've been studying recently. I don't know if you've heard of Otto Schwarmer and Theory U. That's done through the MIT Media Labs, where he works. And he talks about a way of, there's a number of books like Leading from the Emerging Future, and then the big textbook Theory U, that kind of talks about leadership capacities that are needed right now, because the problems we're facing right now are so challenging that they can't be solved from the same level from which they were created. We need to find a higher level to operate from to solve these problems. And he's, through a number of interviews and studying change makers and entrepreneurs and leaders, he's kind of come up with this Theory U thing that talks about the 7 principles are 1, like holding the space, listening to what life calls you to do. And then the second phase is observing and attending with your mind wide open. So you're trying to observe without your voice of judgment and suspending your past cognitive schema to kind of actually see what's there. And then you move into a sensing phase to connect with your heart and open up to see things as interconnected wholes is kind of how he describes it. And then presencing is kind of the bottom of the U process, where it's very much about connecting to the present moment and the deepest source of yourself. And from that point, you can act and kind of let the emerging future kind of manifest through that space and through that kind of pinch point. And then they talk about how to crystallize, prototype, and perform that, and kind of repeat this process over and over as kind of small experiments, but like not going into it with an intention saying, we want to do X. It's more a very deep problem sensing, opening yourself up to what's there. And then through a very specific process of presencing, kind of channel through, almost like the future wants to be born and you're helping it come through you, rather than having a preconceived idea of what you want to do. So it's a little bit, if you've never been in that kind of space, it's a little bit out there as a concept, but it's really fascinating. And it seemed to resonate. The little bit I saw of that video that you shared earlier seemed to have a lot of those little bits of components in there.
Did they talk about the outcomes, any of the outcomes? Are you aware of any outcomes from that kind of a process, Nori?
Yeah, MIT runs something called ULab, 101 and 102, which are, it's a massively online learning course. I think it's run through edX, and they have tens of thousands of people signing up every year to learn these tools. And then ULab 102, it takes small cohorts of people, and they actually come with a general idea, and they work through the process as a team, and they have hundreds and hundreds of teams doing it. So there's a lot of experiential outcomes that they have that have been really great successes there. And they do it in all sorts of fields like medical field or agriculture, dealing with homelessness or food security and all sorts of stuff. People come with all sorts of ideas and work through this system. So it's a really fascinating kind of thing that I stumbled onto last year. And I've worked my way through ULab 1, and my wife and I did ULab 2. We ran out of time, so we're planning to do that whole cycle again this fall when it starts again. But it's really fascinating. If anybody's interested, I would love to go through as a cohort and do it with something in this space, and Catalyst oriented is kind of the main topic and theme, and see if we can do some problem sensing and then come up with prototypes and move through that process. But I just wanted to connect that here because it seemed fairly relevant to some of the things that you've been talking to about.
No, I think that's exactly the type of process. I mean, I think the process is that is a specific process, right? They've designed a specific process. So, but I think that then also it could be, there could be also different approaches as well, but I think that's a really good one. Maybe can you put a link up in the chat, maybe where people could learn more about that?
Yeah,
Really like
and
that.
also,
Sorry.
we've been putting it
Your
up
idea.
on the Miro board. Thanks.
I think Maria had a question before me.
Okay.
No, I love the subject because it goes direct to the consciousness that we are developing. Never ever before the entire humanity wants to be better and want to go forward in a better way. And is nowhere in the world that I see it more clear than I see it in Catalyst. We are on the bet, then we don't want to do anything wrong. We want to thrive and to do things in an interesting way. And another thing is that's remoting reviewing, the way it is saying is like it's so closed. It's a club. Like basically the people that deal with this type of consciousness thing is like a club, and it's so interesting. Remoting viewing for creativity, for planning, for projects, for everything else. It's so amazing seeing the subject being here, and I feel so much for myself because my grandfather was a healer. I saw so many people coming to my house sick, and they are just walking off the better of their could be. And I never understand this, but now that I have all this knowledge and all the things we are seeing here, I can understand this connection that some people have with the earth, have with the energy, have with other human beings.
Yeah, there's a lot of things we don't understand. And I mean, I think that does, well, what do you think? So Marie, what do you think about, or anybody, what do you think about the idea of how we connect to our machine, how we connect to the interface, like the interfaces, because we're dealing with interface with blockchain, right? The users deal with interface. So what do you think about that? What do you think about how does that affect or inform the users of whatever app or whatever, however we connect to our blockchain, no matter what the application is? What do you think about how we build or how we interface and how that affects what we want to develop? Has anybody thought of that?
I am skeptical because everybody keep telling me that my idea, my data is important. So I'm freaking out. I don't put my entire data anywhere anymore. You know, what's my gender? Doesn't matter. What's my full name? Doesn't matter. What is my day of birth? Doesn't matter. So I got actually consciousness that if anybody has this data, they can locate me in anywhere in the world where I am, you know? So I'm trying to catch up with the data I let it go on Facebook, I let it go on YouTube, I let it go on Google. I'm trying to build myself up in the way that nobody can hurt my identity, you know, because I'm very aware. Imagine somebody in a poor country like Brazil, like India and another place, impersonate me and be there collecting aids. I'm very aware of the power of it and how it could damage people. So I'm trying to mitigate the risk. I don't know how everybody else feel like, but I feel skeptical about everything. There is a book. I was 100% into everything until I came to this book that says the algorithm are machines of mass destruction. I didn't read the book yet. I did read the TED talk and everything else, but it's kind of making me more conscious where I'm advertising out there. Because in the end of the day, I'm a Cardano ambassador, a content creator, but the content that I create today reach straight away 6,000 of people. And I'm trying to be very conscious. I'm doing something good here. I'm going in the good way because I want to be in the light. Doesn't matter what it is. If I need to give up Cardano to be in the light that liberates the humanity, I will give up it if I don't think I'm in the right place.
That makes sense. But what about like how you so what does interface mean to people? I guess I'll ask that question. What is an interface?
Compatibility, I would say. I mean, integration.
Integration, like of what? Like for you, like how do you see it?
I would say this is somewhat like a protocol having to match, from my experience, like a payment system. Let's put it like that. You know, there's some kind of connectivity there.
Okay, that makes sense. What about you, Steve?
Fundamental level.
Okay, so a mental level?
A fundamental level, just kind of externalizing your intent. You want to do something to change the world in some way, and an interface is how you can do that, especially in a digital or computer mediated space.
I was in a meeting today where I have 300 lawyers. I shared it before in another room. And they are amazed about the things we can do, but they are scared as well. How we make our interfaces better with the normal uses of every day is what I keep thinking about.
What do you mean by that?
Like blockchain is not a very friendly way to deal with these addresses, about these wallets, these words and everything else. For the guy that is starting blockchain now, it's not user friendly, not at all.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to think of an interface as a set of symbols that's either, you know, inviting you to engage with it, you know, and offering you an interpretation that might, you know, facilitate some sort of interaction, right? So you can create an interface that's difficult, you know, and kind of dense, so that you kind of weed out people, you know, like they really got to want to get into it to get through that interface. Or you can make it, you know, attractive and inviting and kind of easy to interpret whatever symbolism you're using. That's just where I go with it.
Okay. Anybody else have any different interpretations of that? Of interface, what interface means? Just on a really fun, whatever, it doesn't have to be a deep interpretation, just simple.
For me, it's the link between what we talked earlier, this kind of remote viewing and this more technical stuff is feels still very abstract, and so I don't really get the a concrete example yet.
Could I say something? Dominic, remote reviewing is when someone is trained absolutely to see a remote location and tell the American intelligence what is going on there. And it have been done over and over again with a degree of accuracy. So remote reviewing becomes something interesting for many, many industry. For example, the gambling industry, the guns industry, everybody wants to locate a secret information. This is so accurate that someone could go remotely reviewing for your office and find the information in the right place where it is. It's like it's using the best it can from consciousness put in real world uses. I don't know if anyone ever here being in enhancing consciousness, but I have been in something they call access bars. I did that last year in March because somebody told me that was good. And I researched on YouTube and I was very skeptical. I didn't believe it at all, but I paid, you know, you have to pay in advance. And I went for it. In my case, specifically, my stage of evolution, because we are here to evolve. We're not here to stagnate. We are all here to learn information, to absorb this information, to evolve. And it was the most amazing extrasensorial information I ever experience I ever had. But some people have a different experience. So what it does, it works in your hemisphere, in your head. It's a very soft touch, doing some kind of thing. I don't know what the person does, but it kind of make me relax and feel very, very light. When I come out of the sessions, I have a very good ideas, business ideas, partnership ideas, and things in life kind of go flow better. But I think it's always the kind of I believe on it. Maybe if you don't believe it wouldn't work for you, but it's all connected.
Maria, I didn't ask about what is remote viewing. For me, it was more the link between remote viewing and talking about interface, technical interfaces. And for me, that linkage is still very abstract. And just wanted to point out that out. Maybe some of you can maybe have an example for interface, or a more clear example for an interface in that.
Okay. And so I've been exploring like the idea of say with the relevance stone idea. So you know about that idea, Dominic, the one that I spoke about.
Okay. I haven't heard about it. Maybe I know it, but
okay. So I mean, because I was thinking about that. So I was thinking about with more remote, not remote, more rural groups or people who have different cultures, who aren't used to a screen-based interface. They don't even have any experience. So we could teach them the symbols and the language of this interface, this screen interface that we're all using now, right? But it is not connected to the body in the same way as, say, if you go and make something out of, say, wood, and you touch the wood and you have a few sense of it. So people, when and we probably have all done that when we're in nature, so we have more of if we're in nature and we touch things, we move, we breathe, we tend to get we tend to understand our environment that way, right? So if we have a tactile, if we were to have a tactile interface, so in this case it's something that's made out of a clay body or porcelain or a ceramic, and it contains information that is read with light. and then that connects directly to, and then as the light is sensed by a board like an RPI, a Raspberry Pi, and it can connect, it can read that. So how you could connect to your information about your, so you have this thing that you hold, and it's something that you've made in terms of its form, but you hold it and you touch it, and it's got a relation to you, and then it connects to your, it then connects, and then it connects to the, it does what you want it to because of the hashes that are contained within it. Do you see it? So there's hashes, there's information in the stone, in the object itself. So that's a really crude and simple example, but there's others. So if you just, and so I mean, this is a process where, how can you think? So it would take, so you would have to think, Dominic, you'd have to think about how could you connect to, how could you connect? Because you're coming from a Western perspective, and this is, the screen is second nature to you, but how could you connect to the processes that you've created through development, so that the act, in the same sense that the act of moving my hand across the screen of the iPad, my touch, causes things to happen that were different than when we used the keyboard. So what would be different if you used an object instead of, and it didn't, and that was just my simple example, but it could be other different types of objects. It wouldn't have to be like that, or necessarily for those reasons. What we got new information when we could touch the screen and we could move our hand, right? It's different. And it creates a different experience for us. So what kind of experience could we create if we had a different type of, used different objects or interacted in different ways? Or is it, maybe it's just that, maybe it seems instead that the screen is so second nature that we should continue to just use the screen. I mean, that's a possibility too. But how can we bring more information in? Can anybody imagine how they could bring more information in through other senses to an experience where you, if you think of the economy and the building of the economy with Cardano, right? It's building out a new economy. It brings in new people to do different things. So how could you use objects to help represent that or to help facilitate that? Is there a way, or maybe there isn't? So that's the question, I guess.
Yeah, it makes much, yeah, your explanation, or it makes it much more clearly for me what you meant, and what is the linkage between those areas. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, what was it helped me a lot to understand you better. Yeah.
Thank you.
Martha, what's something that we could say is like somewhat in a layman's terms, like antiquated to be like this right now? Like, what is it? Maybe a good example to kind of say like this, but you know what I mean?
Yeah. So you mean in terms of a tactile interface?
Yeah, like what's a good example?
Well, I mean, I think a good example is like the screen, the glass of the iPad. That's tactile. You get feedback from that. It's smooth. It's really smooth to touch. It has a clarity, to it. So there's feedback that you get because of the actual form of it, correct? So if you think about it instead, let's think of it. Well, okay, let's talk about, what about a hardware wallet? Is a hardware wallet an interface?
Right, it's debatable.
What do you, you have to hold it, you have to push buttons, right?
Mm-hmm.
Interface. Anybody can think of any other types of interfaces that might not be just a computer?
I have a really trivial but powerful, for me, example from this week, when for the first time I met up with somebody that I met in these Discord servers in real life. And Ohm and I had a chance to sit across a table from each other, and for him to express the very same ideas he had talked to me about across the screen, but to do so with a notebook in between us and his pen writing on the pages of the notebook. It's again, it's so obvious, but it was still really jarring in the moment to be looking at each other and saying, everything about the way you're sharing these ideas feels different. I can feel the way that I'm understanding these ideas differently right now. And the last 15 months, I don't think I'm alone that I have established habits and ways of being from being more isolated that will take some work to unlearn, and even to relearn these basic things like sitting in fellowship with a notebook is has some advantages, as it turns out.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that's, I mean, so our face to face, and here I am without just with an image, but our face to face is an interface, right? I mean, that's a good example. And how much information that we get. And I mean, we get when we sit next across from somebody, I mean, you've sent so many things that you never talk about, right? I mean, it can make you trust someone or not trust someone. It's so powerful. And even so, like in these Zoom calls, there's so much mediation. Yeah, right, James. There's so much mediation, right? It's it makes us we have to come up with different ways of communicating within this interface. This is a specific interface, right? The little squares, and where we put a picture or we put our video image. So, but the more tactile it is. So in James' example, that was a really tactile example. I mean, he could feel the heat of Ohm's breath or something, or something like that. You know, he could sense him. So the more engaged we are with what we're doing, the closer we are to it, the more information we can, the more trust we have. I guess I could say that too, which is an important thing, right? For when we're dealing with blockchain, trust is important. The more engagement we have, the more we trust it, the more we would trust it. The more ownership we have of it, the more we would trust it. So what else? What else? Anybody else about thinking about how to engage with computing processes, and specifically with blockchain, if anybody has any ideas?
Yeah, I was quiet up to now. I'm normally not that quiet, but I'm learning so much. So thank you for that already. Fascinating area. And I think what you said last is actually very interesting. I mean, the connection between the people here, the connection on, the trust eventually of the blockchain is also through the network, right, of the people, and the engagement they are putting into something, right? And I think, and that's something for me that was always very important. Now we change the perception and the connection between people, very different people, in a positive way. Because when we meet someone, right, it's enough for me to say my name, right, and some people would like me and some people would not like me, right? But if you meet and that's an interface, and anyway, so it's fascinating way. I'm still learning and getting what you say, but for me, it's, what's special in Cardano is really the network of people and the catalyst, and it's not more than a technology, right? It's the people making this technology and the network that is creating the trust finally, somehow around that. But again, just first observation, still a lot to learn on that. So.
Yeah, and there's so many layers to it. Like you said, like your name, you put your name out, you put your face out, how you interact with people. So, I mean, there's so many layers that we can perceive, and the more mediation there is, the less layers we perceive, right? The more mediation, the less the layers. And so to be able to And I wonder, I just got a thought too, is how do you think that works in terms of like AI? So if you're working with the AI process, are there different layers than if you're interacting with an AI process? Does anybody have any sense of that? Or are there more layers of mediation between you and the AI process? Because I mean, if we have all these layers, right? And we put ourselves out, we have intelligence. So if you talk like with it, if we engage with an AI process, does the AI process also have, does it have less layers than us when we engage with it, or more layers?
I would say more, only because it's then in the place of black and white, and it needs to be having direction of which A or B to choose, which then creates more processes, is my perception.
So can you say a little bit more about that, Jennifer? That's interesting.
Well, just like in, you're having to go about this different, well, first of all, in the AI, there's so many different means of putting that together. So let's say there's different models, and then you're going to need to check your accuracy. Then you're testing. I mean, there's just so many different elements to this that is creating a lot more process, I would say. But what is good about that is that it's auditable process, right? So I think it all depends on kind of what is the end goal here, but I
do you
think,
go ahead, sorry.
It's just, to me, something of, if you want to have a verifiable process and then you know that that's going to go this way, or is it something that you're wanting to have maybe like a river where it's able to do other things also? I don't know. That's kind of, if it's automated, sometimes, like, let's say a funnel just goes from one thing to another, right? It's just automatically going to do the next thing regardless of which option is chosen. But then you have like an interactive where, because I'll give you a good example on it was a Black Swan series, and it was an interactive show where you could choose the ending in essence, right? So then the story changed based on the selection that you made, right? And I thought that was really fascinating. So it's just really interesting. It's like, how do you want it to go? Because it's really up to you. This is a creative process, So
Did you go through that process?
Yeah, it was really fascinating to see this show. Now, I don't know about the back end of this actually, but the point is that it was either it's generic, that it's always going to get to the same end result, or the end result can be variable actually.
Right. So when that's happening, it seems like it sort of mirrors your intention then, right? Because you have to choose, so it's sort of creating options for you so that there can be a mirror of your intention. So the dropping of the mediation is because it's about you, right? The structure helps you to realize your own interests, like what you want.
And it's like, in this design process, is like, does whoever designing this always want to come to have control, or are they giving this person who is going through this more control? So that's another thing to think about too.
That's true. Yeah. Anybody else have any experiences with AI where they can talk about what the interface might be, or what the levels of mediation might be?
A lot of AI's hidden these days. Like if you go to Amazon and it has recommendations for you, that's all 100% powered by AI, and you don't even see it. So there's no, it's like and the algorithms behind a lot of things. The more explicit ones in my life are like Siri or Alexa, kind of the digital voice assistants where you can just talk to them. Although yeah, it's not perfect yet. So it's occasionally you got to repeat yourself, or it's a little bit frustrating in its current form, and limited because it's trying to imitate talking to another human. You expect it to interact in that way, and it doesn't, because it's a computer and it's a very focused, limited AI, and it knows how to do very specific focused things that it's been trained to do, but it's not like universal artificial intelligence. So you can't have a conversation necessarily, at least at the consumer level. There may be things going on with AGI and things that I have no idea about, but yeah, so my interactions with AI have largely been through whatever's available commercially through our devices. But also I work for companies that use AI in the background. So I know that they're fairly pervasive in a lot of places where you're analyzing massive amounts of data and trying to create user preference or suggestions or things like that.
Mhm.
And the way you interact with those AIs is way different because it's not intended for consumers or the end user to actually interact with the AI. It's more the business or the programmer interacting with the AI to make it do something.
So the users aren't aware of the AI.
Right, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So
I know
were
in-
there, oh, go ahead, Steve.
Can I just say one little thing, because I have not really much technical knowledge about AI, but I did see AGI video in which when Ben and Charles meet Grace, and that's their solution, like a robot. Not only that, like a nurse, and they had a conversation, and I must say it was quite impressive about what kind of responses Grace managed to come up with. So it's apparently, as Charles Hoskinson always said, by far the furthest ahead with AI, and certainly AI on blockchain. That's AGI. Suggest to really go look, see what they do. That's it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I saw that. It's going to take care of the elderly.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Really, really, yeah. Take temperature and everything, so it has but also the conversation, of course, that was just held between three was kind of like, well, wait, and what I would have expected seen in the past. So that can add to this.
And I mean, her the material that her skin is made out of, and it is the top layer of the interface, right? Or at least that's my perception. I don't know if anybody else has a different perception of that.
I haven't analyzed it since for that I like the technical experience. I find it an amazing technology, but yeah, it's but it's coming fast. That's what I kind of sense. I see.
Steve, you had something to say? Do you remember?
Yeah, well, I remember what I was going to say, but it's funny to me that you consider the skin on Grace as the top layer of the interface, because and I was going more to the non-tactile part, right? Because she talks, she responds, and the question is it recorded? Is she really thinking? And like if I think of myself as some old person that needs care, do I want a machine touching me, even if it's looks like a person or talks like a person? It's still a machine, and I'm immediately reminded of this research I read a couple of weeks ago about the best thing that could happen for a prematurely born baby is constant solid skin contact, right? That will speed up that development that needs to happen for a premature infant like that. And I'm not convinced that, you know, a robot taking care of me as an old person is going to be a good substitute for somebody in the last period of their life who's alone, right? And clearly they're alone, or why would they have a robot taking care of them? And I, you know, so like I have real issues with where people are assuming, you know, to me, that's very assumptive that that's like the first best use case of artificial intelligence and robotics. I think if we respect our elders, we're going to be there for them. We're not going to send a robot. You know, you might as well send a Lamborghini. You know,
Yes, but there's one thing in the COVID crisis, those robots won't get sick. Point in time, nurses died during COVID at a high rate. So that, of course, another possibility to be used, I think.
So
Yes, Steve.
what I was, go ahead.
Oh, remember that I told you about my story in the book club about my relatives finding me during COVID from my 23andMe report? Do you remember me talking about that? So I guess what I'm trying to get at is, are those people who have like never been a part of my life, but yet we are somehow, you know, blood related, if you will, any more knowing about me versus like a computer who has spent every day with me, has analyzed me, knows what ticks me off, knows what makes me happy, is going to be able to read me better than someone who really doesn't know me at all, right? So it becomes this thing of knowledge, actually, and of over time processing, which is kind of hard to say which is the better, right? Because it's still debatable, but it's still the thing of who knows you better, actually, right?
Well, but you know, I mean, you're if your computer's the one that knows you better, right? Because it's got all this input from you. You're still directing how you want it to react to you, you know. And with a human being, you know, you've got a pretty large spectrum of possibility and how that human being is going to react to you, particularly somebody you don't know.
Yeah, well, maybe get killed too.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's kinda, you can choose your friends, but you can't choose your family, you know.
More unpredictable. The
So we
human being is more unpredictable.
So we're talking about the soul and the spirit as an interface, right?
Are we? How do you see that?
Even the skin. I mean, you know, like, do you get that feedback when you know, I mean, like we could talk to the people who buy the sex dolls. I mean, is it as good? I don't know. I doubt it.
Yeah, Jennifer is talking about knowledge and how do you interface? What is the interface with knowledge? Is it a spirit? Is it a soul? How to define
Is it a program? I don't know. Like, obviously, there's data about everything though now, right? I mean, everything is about, and blockchain, let's be honest, is an upgrade to data, you know? So this is in reality just adding another process though, you know?
I look at a completely different point of view, actually. It's like, for instance, in the West, I know in Belgium and many other countries, people grow older and there are less and less births. So you get an aging population, less and less working people that can support it. So you create, actually, when those older generation becomes older and older and starts dying, there are less and less real nurses to be treating everyone. So at one point in time, it won't be we choose between a nurse, a real person, and a robot. You either will need to choose between nothing or that robot, because there won't be enough nurses to go around. That's actually what I think. That probably is an evolution that might predict the need for race.
But what if it's just different processes you're comfortable with? Like, I'm comfortable with interacting with a computer for my sensitive data because I know it's encrypted, right? But that doesn't mean I'm okay with a computer giving me a shot. So I think that there's different levels also to this, though, that we can't think so black and white that it's going to take over everything, because that's actually, I don't feel very possible.
I'm I'm actually not thinking about it until this conversation, but if I feel my death approaching, I am much more going to be like an old dog. I'm going to go out in the woods. At least there I'm one with nature. I'm not trying to figure out what a fucking robot was coming,
Maybe maybe only the
Let's
coroner's
just-
office should use robots to pick
Say
people
that
up.
Steve is not an average people, an average person. So
Hey,
Also-
Aiden, are you? Sorry, go. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Because when you're speaking about software who tracks information and everything, and for example, your example, Jennifer, now you have met some people from your family. Because I think at least what we have in the digital space, everything who keeps track of information, I think it's the very first time in human life where we have the possibility to really create really our existence on a really true level. Because, for example, who are you? When I ask your mother, she will give me one interpretation of yourself. When I ask your father, he will give me another interpretation. Your best friend will give me another interpretation. When I ask yourself, you will give me again another interpretation. So who are you? The identification of yourself, at least you don't exist. Nobody of us exists because a lot of us exist. Depends on the observers in which we interact. Because this is it's a very subjective interpretation of ourselves.
So you say,
Software is not. Software is 100% objective. And I think to see it like this, it means at least that we have an educational tool which keeps track of everything what we are doing. They will not interpret something in this. They only keep track of the things we are doing. So they not act in human behavior. They don't act the sentimental or sensitive or subjective layer on it. And I think this is something where a lot of people would be really afraid. Imagine you are confronted with your true self. The porns you are watching, the videos, the whatnot, the stuff, and you are confronted just with the 100% feedback of your actions. And not the individual interpretation about the person who keeps you maybe in this comfortable zone. Says, yeah, I don't tell you the truth maybe because I know it would harm you, which already always lowers down a little bit of your true existence, because you know you are like this. We all are devils and angels.
I think we're all elephants, right? People, nobody sees nothing but a piece of you. You could be an elephant for all you know.
Mm-hmm.
I always say I'm an elephant because I never forget anything.
That's where my mind went
but
too.
you should.
Can I just break in there? We're gathering back in the main channel for a little bit. I don't know if anyone's interested to join us for a little bit of a big group video. Thank you. I don't know if, but we'd like to do that shortly in the main channel.
Okay, cool.
I really have to run.
Yeah,
Thank you, Marta.
Thank you. You're welcome. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, Marta,
Yeah.
was brilliant.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah. Thank you
Okay.
very much. It was a great
You're
topic.
welcome.
Love it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Marta,
Okay.
one really important thing I want to mention with this guy who gonna stalk you and spam you all the time.
Yeah.
Really